So if there ever was a situation where general manager is sitting out there for his day one press conference and they're asking him about the draft and all that, there's ever a time where the GM can look right directly in the camera and say, we took the best available player. Well, you know that that is it to a T, because it really, there's not a whole lot else to explain unless there was something based on what you've heard of why they might have liked also another player, but this player really fit because of.
Well, I think Jason Light kind of put it perfectly. They had a very select group of guys. It was very small. It was like 2 or 3 players that they had said, if these guys fall to us, we are not moving and we're taking them. These guys are, players that we want in our building. We don't care what the position is. These are Buccaneer men. And that's a mantra that Jason Light, when they sat down and they reevaluated their draft strategy after a lot of these draft misses, they said, who are the kind of men that we want in our building? Who are the kind of players, the kind of people? And so they put a silhouette of Levante David up on the wall and put characteristics across it saying, these are what we're looking for in players, because we don't just want them to be good players. We want them to be good people. And so Emeka Egbuka was at the top of that list, that if he was there, the Bucs were taking him. Now on my show leading up to the draft, I did talk a lot about wide receivers, but I was talking about day 3 guys. I was looking starting in round 4. I was talking about guys like Pat Bryant out of Illinois. You guys can see the block guy behind me.
That's like, where I thought he was going to go too. I was shocked when he went so high. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is a perfect player for the Bucs, because he's a great receiver. Yeah. He's a clutch receiver. Like, there was no receiver in college football that was better than he was in the final 2 minutes of the game. But when he spoke to us at the combine, and I was there for it, and he said, no block, no rock. So he knew that he had to be a blocking wide receiver in order to earn targets. And I'm like, that is right up Jason Light's alley, because Chris Godwin, one of the best blocking wide receivers in the game. And, you have Bucky Irving back there. Now you have to make sure that your receivers are willing to get down and dirty to make sure that they spring their running back. So I was like, that's the kind of guy. Then they take Emeka Egbuka. And at first, I was absolutely stunned. I'm like, oh my goodness, you had Jahad Campbell sitting there, who I talked about a ton because of the need at linebacker. You had some of these edge rushers sitting there. And the more I started to think about it, the more I was like, Todd Bowles has told us for months that this is what they were going to do. He was asked at the combine. He said, what position specifically are you looking at here at the combine? And without hesitation, he said, wide receivers. And you take a look at how the Bucs season transpired last year. You lose Mike and Chris in the same game. You lose Godwin for the entire season. You lose Mike for a month. So now your receiving core is Jalen McMillan when he was healthy, because he had injury issues. You have Sterling Shepard. You have Ryan Miller. You have Cam Johnson. You have Rakim Jarrett. You needed another body there. And so the addition of Egbuka, who goes to a school like Ohio State, who personally I despise. I've lived in Ohio my entire life. I'm an hour away from Columbus. I hate Ohio State. But they churn out NFL players.
Yeah,
this guy has played with Marvin Harrison Jr., a top 5 pick. He has played with Garrett Wilson. He has played with, this is a school that has churned out Santonio Holmes and Joey Galloway and Hall of Fame receivers, Chris Carter. Emeka Egbuka is the school's all-time leading receiver, and he was never the number 1 option. That's insane to me. So he comes to a team where he knows he's not the number 1 option. He can help facilitate Godwin's recovery so that the Bucs don't have to rely on him trying to come back and do too much too fast. He slides into that slot role. And now when Godwin is fully healthy, and I'm not saying Godwin won't play week 1, he will, but he's going to be kind of on a pitch count. But then as soon as he's all the way back and he's playing that slot, now you have a guy in Egbuka who can line up on the outside. He can line up on the inside. He can line up in the backfield. He can do everything. And you see now, with the addition of Jalen McMillan last year, the addition of Emeka Egbuka this year, you have kind of the next generation of Bucs receivers waiting in the wings, learning from the greatest receiver duo that this team has ever seen, with a first ballot Hall of Famer in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, the guy who has the best hands that Tom Brady has ever thrown to, and that is coming from Tom Brady himself. So, once you started to take a look at everything that Emeka brings, both in terms of leadership, in terms of experience, in terms of just personal characteristics, the pride that he carries himself with, the respect that he has for his teammates, his coaches, his opponents, everything. And then you see what kind of player he is, that there's not a route he can't run. There's not a catch that he can't make. This was an incredible addition to the only team in the postseason last year that was top 4 in rushing offense and passing offense. And now they have a legit chance to be the number 1 offense in all of football this year.
Yeah, look, as strange as it might have been, the fact is that is why there is a term of picking the best player available, because of the fact that it does make sense a lot more often than it doesn't. Even when you have a loaded receiver room, there is a reason, and you went through it. And so it does make more sense. I will say this, though. I think it was a little bit more surprising, even though it's a 7th round pick, that they went with another receiver in their 6-man draft class. Because again, best available player, and there's no way Booker is not going to be a really good player in this league. He just has that type of makeup, and you just know it. But overall, it looks like they have decided that they know if they're going to have a chance to win a championship, they've just got to flood this team with as many difference makers as possible, and let Baker fly. And he's got as good as a collection of receivers as any in the league.
Well, and I think the selection of Tez Johnson is another one that goes beyond the offense. So obviously, good friends with Bucky Irving, teammates, they were roommates. But you take a look at what he brings to not just an offense, but special teams. And here's where it's going to get really dicey for the Bucs, because I mean, you have the depth chart up there. Trey Palmer has not really been the guy that they were hoping that he would be, especially when it comes in terms of the return game.
Okay.
So now Tez Johnson is competing with Trey Palmer, along with Rakim Jarrett, along with Cam Johnson, for that final receiver spot. Like the receiver battle in training camp for the Bucs for those last 2 spots is going to be incredible to witness, because you have a lot of these guys that would be a wide receiver 4, a wide receiver 5 on other teams. And now the Bucs are going to have that difficult decision of who are we going to keep? Who are we going to try to have on the practice squad that could get plucked at any moment to end up on another team's 53-man roster? So I think in the selection of Tez Johnson in the 7th round, at that point, you're kind of throwing darts, right?
Sure.
You want to bring in a guy that's going to give whichever side of the ball he plays on an opportunity, but at the same time, they have to be special teams players.
Yep.
So if you can upgrade your return game in the process of getting an offensive weapon, because Tez is another guy, he's going to catch screen passes. He's going to line up in the backfield. He's that slippery, quick guy. He may not be blazing fast on the straight line speed, but he's so quick and elusive, the same way Bucky is, that found him so much success, that he is going to be a legit option in the offense. Because I mean, what are you going to do at that point if you're a defense? You're staring at 5 wide when you have to take care of Mike, Chris, McMillan, Ibuka. Now you got Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson's probably the one that ends up with the mismatch. You're going to put him one-on-one with a linebacker. He's going to cook him. So it does make for a really fun offense when you look at it that way. But I think the Tez Johnson selection had more to do with upgrading special teams, which they also did with the addition of Riley Dixon as the punter after they had all the punter issues last year. But I think that played into it even more than what he could do in Josh Grizzard's offense.
Will he be tested out at both kick and punt returner?
I believe so, but I think it would be primarily punt returner. That's
Okay.
where they're looking for a little bit more juice. I don't expect Bucky to be back there returning kicks this season like he did last
No,
year.
no more. No.
But yeah, I would say punt return is where they need a little bit more of an electric player, someone with a little bit more capability than what we've seen out of Trey Palmer.
And by the way, I think what also, if you take a look at like players like Tez Johnson, or what's his name on Houston, Tank Dell. The difference is that Tank Dell was drafted and looked at as a major contributor. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems was his size. And this is why, because that body cannot withstand the NFL that much. It just can't. And that's the reason why I'm sure some teams probably just wasn't even on his board. Same thing with Tez Johnson. But the difference is with Tez is you're drafting him in the 7th round and you're not throwing him out there for 300 or 400 snaps this season. Maybe he gets 150, 100, who knows? But that's a respectable enough number, including the special teams. That's a good enough number where you'll be a lot less risky that he's going to end up, getting banged up and a serious injury like we've seen from Tank. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense in round 7, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. It just, Todd Bowles said it. Jason Light said it after the draft and during OTAs and everything. And it was, if you want to win in this league with the way the NFL has evolved, because back when I first started watching football, during the Cowboys dynasty, it was all about defense. It was all about defenses. And now it's all about the offense. The rules are lean towards the offense. So you have to be able to put up points. And, in the Bucs situation last year, who knows if they get past the Commanders, if Chris Godwin is playing, who knows, if they go on the losing streak that they win on, if Mike and Chris don't get hurt in that Ravens game, because even without those two guys, it was still a 1-score loss to the Falcons. It was a 1-score loss to the Chiefs. It was close games the rest of that way. And then they go on their run, win 6 of their last 7. But, the Bucs are not going to be put in that situation again, because you have McMillan, who emerged late in the year once he did get healthy, because he was in and out of the lineup early on. But he and Jamar Chase tied for the most touchdowns in the NFL over the course of the last 5 weeks. So he comes on strong. Then you bring in Emeka Egbuka. You have the wild card in Tez Johnson. Like, this is a legitimately dangerous offense. And I did a show not too long ago, and I got dragged by some fans of opposing teams where I said the Bucs have the best wide receiver room in the NFL, and it's not close. Top to bottom, they are the best and deepest wide receiver room in the league. And I know, there was a website that just released their top 10 receiver rooms, and the Bucs were number 2. And I'm like, no, they're not. I respect.
Who are they behind? Were they behind the Eagles?
The Eagles, yeah.
Okay.
I respect.
But the Eagles have
Brown.
3.
Sure.
I don't know if they have a 4.
And if it comes down to the 4 and the 5 and the 6, the Bucs had the advantage over everyone. So I realize that people want to look at those top 2 and say, this is why they're number 1. But the Bucs top 2 aren't anything to shake your head at. Again, first ballot Hall of Famer in Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, who was on pace to be one of the best receivers in the NFL last season. If Godwin stays healthy, Jamar Chase is not winning a Triple Crown. It's not happening.
Yeah, just taking a look there, just confirming it. Yeah, the Eagles they don't have a legitimate number 4 receiver. They just don't. They've got young guys, but Bucs have a Sterling Shepard. They've now got a couple of obviously McMillan is the 4 guy, which just blows away any 4 guy on the Eagles. Do you think Shepard is as close to a lock as possible, or because he's a veteran compared to the other guys, or is he in the same boat as a Trey Palmer and a Jarrett and a Miller?
He's 100% in the same boat. I realized they just brought him back, and signed him to another 1-year deal. That's Baker's guy. That's his buddy from Oklahoma. But the best receivers are the ones that are going to emerge. So if Shepard has some drop issues like he had late in the season, And Palmer's catching everything that comes his way, or Jarrett is catching everything that comes his way. They're really high on Cam Johnson. They've been high on him for a while. It is a true legitimate battle, and I have mentioned Sterling Shepard as a potential cut candidate, where he's got to go out there. He's got to earn that job. Nothing is guaranteed to him by any stretch of the imagination.
And so who's in the lead as far as you're concerned? Give me the because I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you keep 6 or 7. 7's a lot. So
it is.
Who do you think is the 5, 6, and 7 right now? If you had to put that in order right after the top 4, who would be 5, 6, and 7?
I would say right now 5, 6, 7 is going to be Shepard.
I'm going to say in order of he's definitely we may not see Johnson better than a couple other guys, but he'll probably make the team because he'll give you more. So I'm looking at that more than who do you think is actually a better receiver? Who do you think has the best chance of making the team 5, 6, and 7?
I would say right now my pecking order would go Shepard, Johnson, Jarrett.
Okay, so Palmer's in trouble.
I think Palmer's in trouble.
Okay.
I think Cam Johnson. I'm really, really split between Jarrett and Johnson. And by that I mean Cam Johnson, not Tez. But I think they're going to try to keep Cam on the practice squad. I think they try to keep Ryan Miller on the practice squad. It's just going to be so tough. And again, that can change from day to day as far as that pecking order is concerned. I give Shep the edge because of the fact that he is a veteran. He can help these younger guys get acclimated to the NFL game. He is a voice in the locker room that young guys will listen to because of his experiences. So I think that does give him a little bit of an edge. But I think Tez makes the team because of what we talked about with the special teams factor. And then, of course, what he can bring to the offense. But I think they only keep 6. And if you keep 6, I think, oh, man, it's going to be such a tough choice. That's why I can't wait to watch that battle unfold. And then the battle for the secondary depth, and I know we'll get to the defense, but that secondary depth is going to be a true battle as well because of all the issues that they had with injuries at corner and safety last year. That's where they bulked up, and there's only so many spots that can go around.
I tell you what, let's just stick on offense because even though there are no other draft picks, the only free agent signing on offense went to Charlie Heck. So does Heck now take over the role as the top swing tackle?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the goal of bringing him in. And, it was Brian Baldinger a couple of weeks ago was talking about how the Bucs are one of the few teams in the NFL that has the entire starting 5 of their offensive line back this season that they had last season. I expect a big step forward for Graham Barton. And then I expect this unit to get even better than it already was. Ben Bredesen came in battling for his starting job with Sua Opeta. He wins that job by default because Opeta, gets injured in training camp. It was like the 3rd or 4th practice of training camp. Opeta goes down. So Bredesen wins that job, but then he earned a second contract. He was absolutely fantastic last season. So I think the offensive line is another one where you look at it and you go, this is really what's going to help separate the Bucs from a lot of these other teams that are talked about in the conversation as favorites of the NFC. But the cohesion, you have an all-pro left tackle, only player in NFL history to get an all-pro at both tackle spots in Tristan Wirfs. And then Cody Mauch has gotten better each and every year. Luke Gedeke has gotten better each and every year. And again, you still have Graham Barton there, who you would expect to take a big step forward after his rookie year, a little more comfortable. Yep. There's reports that he's become a little bit more of a vocal leader among the offensive line, and you love to hear that from such a young player. So bringing in Heck, I think was a great move. Jason Light and Todd Bowles, they both love those really versatile backup linemen that can play multiple positions. So you lose Robert Hainsey, who was kind of a he was your backup center. He wasn't a backup center, though. He could start for a lot of teams, so he took that opportunity. So, you have these guys that can play both tackles. You have these guys that can play guard and center, and that allows the Bucs to keep fewer offensive linemen because they do have to keep so many receivers and so many guys in the secondary because there are so many talented players that they have there that they don't want to lose.
I mean, is that a potential concern, though? Because not every team, mostly every team, is not going to survive the season without some injuries, banged up here, banged up there along the offensive line. You usually need to have a sixth or a seventh. There's your swing tackle, but you also have to add at least one or two other guys that will see some sort of playing time. Is there a player that has the best chance of stepping in for a few games and there's not a big drop off besides Heck, or the opposite? Is there a position or two where you feel there would be a concern if one or two players were to get banged up for longer than a few games?
The big concern to me is center. If Graham Barton goes down, that's where I'm concerned. Last year, you weren't really worried about it because you knew Hainsey could step in. This year, it's Majors, and that is a little bit of a concern. Outside of that, though, I would be pretty comfortable as long as it's not a long-term injury to any of these guys, and they do only have to step in for a half or a game or something like that. Like Sua Opeta coming back, I think that's great. He already knows the offense. The offense is not going to change much between Cohen and Grizzard. It's just now you had to wait on him to be healthy. You have Elijah Klein, who, by all accounts, was taking massive strides after being a draft pick last year.
Okay.
And he has really impressed a lot of people. So, yeah, center's where I'm concerned. Outside of that, if it's just a game or two, I think the depth that they have built along the offensive line is really, really solid.
Okay, so Klein being a draft pick, like you said, you're hearing good things. And Majors, by the way, very surprised that he did not get drafted. He was actually right up there as I'm not sure exactly where he was because I'm pretty sure Arledge graded him pretty highly at the center position. And of course, he played a lot of big games at Texas. He was the top-rated center for our lads. And even though he was projected to go in round 3 or round 4, it was a big surprise that he wasn't drafted. So the Bucs, even though it's a UDFA, that's a player that has 3rd or 4th round talent. So if that continues, and I think there might have been some injury concerns with him, but if that continues and you've got Opeta and Klein that they're comfortable with, and you've got the swing Heck, then you're in a lot better. You are in a lot better shape than you would think so just by looking at the depth chart on paper.
Yeah, and I think the concern for me, or at least for me personally, when it comes to Majors, is if Barton gets hurt, you don't have the guy with NFL experience waiting.
Yeah,
that's where the concern kind of lies. Whereas last year, Hainsey had stepped in, he had been there, done that, he had been a starter for the team. He had a great year after having to fill in for Ryan Jensen when that gruesome injury went down. Had a little bit of a down year the year after. Wasn't entirely his fault, but the Bucs saw an opportunity to upgrade the position in last year's draft. But to your point, I mean, Majors being the top graded center at our lads speaks to how this draft really was. And this was something that I really tried to hammer home on Locked On Bucs throughout the entire draft process. Was there was about 10 to 15 guys that were true first round graded players. Outside of that, the next 200 guys could have gone anywhere from the 2nd to the 7th round. They were all so clumped together where, the strength of this draft was the middle rounds. And I think that's why the Bucs did such a great job in how they approached the draft by taking best player available with Ibuka, who arguably was one of those guys with a first round grade. And then after that, just letting everything else fall to them because, last year, guys that were taken in the 6th round of this draft would have been day 2 picks last year. So, it was great for the Bucs to get Majors. I would just be concerned of the lack of NFL experience and kind of being thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, well, they're going to roll the dice there, and sometimes you have to do that. and hope that you get away with it. And maybe that's what they're going to do. Maybe they also feel that, and again, I don't know what other, there's usually a couple of veteran centers out there on the market and free agency that you could pick up at camp. Camp's over. Maybe they see if Majors is looking like a legit guy that they could count on if called upon. And if not, then maybe they make a move to bring in a veteran. There's more than enough time. And who knows? Maybe they trade one of those receivers for a backup center. Anything's possible.
Yeah, or they're just waiting for the 53-man cut down, see what veterans get let loose. Boom, veteran minimum. Come on in here. Give us some experience on the bench.
Okay, let's now move over. By the way, is there any other player on offense with the UDFAs that has made any noise? I know Garrett Green is going to be interesting to follow. I'm sure he's going to be stashed on the practice squad, and I doubt anybody would pick him up. You never know. I guess it all depends what kind of preseason he has, but the transition from quarterback to receiver is going to take a while. So that seems like a really good developmental player. But was there any of those other guys that have made any noise yet, or is it just too early?
I think it's a little too early. There were some people that were talking about Josh Williams, and they were impressed with him during OTAs, during all that. But outside of that, I think we really need to wait until training camp when these guys are really, when it's not shorts and t-shirts. Todd Bowles said that numerous times. There's only so many things you can tell from shorts and t-shirts. Once they start putting the pads on, we're going to start to see kind of which of these UDFAs are going to be able to step up. I think there's probably a better opportunity for some of the defensive UDFAs to be able to make the 53, but we'll have to wait and see. If they can stash Williams on the practice squad, run with 3 running backs the way they did last year, and then call him up as needed, I think that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, there are like 3 or 4 guys on defense, the UDFAs, that stick out to me, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. All right, now let's start with the cornerback spot, because that is where the Bucs double down in rounds 2 and 3. And to be able to land Benjamin Morrison, to me, and maybe this is another reason why I kind of felt it was part of the reason why I kind of felt Arizona also had a very good draft, was because they were able to land, both teams were able to land the 2 top corners just about a year ago that people thought were going to be top 10, top 15 picks, and that ended up being second-round picks. So for the Bucs to be able to get one of those guys in Benjamin Morrison, yes, he was injured. We get that. But I'm sure all the fans must be just really ecstatic to be able to get a kid in that talent in round 2. And then what do you think also about whether it was surprising or not that they went right after another corner in round 3?
I have never gotten the response over a draft pick that I did for Benjamin Morrison. I started talking about Benjamin Morrison on my show as a player that the Bucs should be seriously interested in October. I have been talking about this kid for almost a full year. And I kept hammering it and hammering it and hammering it. And I was like, look, this was a consensus top 15 pick until the hip injury. And then he misses that season. Who knows if we're talking about Ibuka being a national champion, if Morrison and Riley Mills are playing in that game. I mean, you remember, even though Notre Dame lost to Ohio State the year before, Morrison on Marvin Harrison Jr., again, top 5 pick, completely shut him down. He was targeted 5 times. He got 3 receptions for 31 yards. Absolutely a non-factor. So Morrison, he was one of the best corners in the draft. And so, I was thrilled. And then, of course, all the listeners start, DMing me on Twitter. I was getting text messages from people. I was absolutely stoked about that pick, because he is, without a doubt, one of the best corners in this draft class. And again, if it's not for injury, we're probably talking about the Bucs selecting Morrison at 19 and not Ibuka, because that's where he would have gone, if not earlier. And then Jacob Parrish. I wasn't surprised that they went secondary again, But I truly believed, and it was kind of the dream for my son. You and I were talking off air about how my son's a huge Notre Dame fan. It was kind of the dream that they were going to snag Xavier Watts right there. Instead, they go Jacob Parrish, and
Wow.
from the jump, people cannot stop gushing about Jacob Parrish and what he has been able to do. He's undersized for a corner, but everybody that has talked about him, coaches, players, former teammates, former coaches, say the exact same thing. He is an absolute dog. And that selection has allowed the Bucs to kind of free up what they want to do in that secondary by moving Tyke Smith back to that safety position where he played at Georgia. So you now have two guys on this roster, Tyke Smith and Christian Izien, that can play slot corner and can play safety. You now have a rookie starting slot corner, which is the same thing they had last year when Tyke got put into that role, who is an absolute grinder. So I really love that pick. He was probably the biggest winner of OTAs and minicamp as far as the rookies were concerned, in the impact that he had and the impression that he made on everyone.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Morrison, he did fine in OTAs. He did really well on the first day of minicamp, missed the second 2 days of minicamp. Now, to be fair, something as simple as an ingrown toenail, they're going to be overly cautious and they're going to keep you out of practice. So I'm not reading too much into that. They're not reading too much into that.
Okay.
But Morrison, he had a day where he was going one-on-one with Ibuka all day and had multiple pass breakups. So he's already going toe-to-toe with their first-round pick, and a guy that we expect to kind of fill that Godwin role early in the season. He's primed and ready to roll. The problem is he going to be able to crack the starting lineup? And I think that's where part of the cornerback battle in training camp is going to hash itself out, because Jamel Dean is good when he's available, but the best ability is availability. And this is a guy that you can bet your house on the fact that he is going to leave a game with injury within the first month.
Okay.
That's the last time I was on here. We were talking about Jamel Dean as a potential cut candidate because they could get out from that contract, and it's not worth the money that he's being paid for the lack of games that he's playing it. So is Morrison going to go out there and win that job outright, or is he going to have to buy his time and wait for that opportunity? And then once he sees the field, he's not coming off. It doesn't matter if it's a 1 game injury or a 1 month injury. As soon as Morrison is on the field, Jamel Dean is not going to get his starting job back unless Morrison really implodes. And I just don't see that happening. Not with the skills that he has, the mentality that he has. And I was talking to Evan Klosky of 10 Tampa Bay. He's the sports director of their CBS affiliate. And he said, look, this is a guy that's, it's 100 degrees outside with 3,000% humidity. Guys are dragging. And there's Morrison out there with a gigantic smile on his face. And he said, I'm just happy to be out here.
I can imagine. Yeah.
It's one of those things where he told us at the combat, we waited. Poor Benjamin Morrison. He went from an enormous crowd at his podium at the scouting combine to, I think by time he got to the podium, there was about a dozen of us left, because he was over an hour late and he had gotten caught up doing the medicals. Completely at his control. He immediately thanked us for waiting on him, apologized for being late, and then kept it moving. But he told us that he didn't understand how important football was to him until it was ripped away from him. He had reached every goal he had ever set for himself: starter as a freshman, All-American, captain, and then he had the rug pulled out from under him, with an opportunity where he had to watch his teammates go through the college football playoff, get to a national championship, and then lose because they were down so many starters, with him being one of the most important ones. So this is a very, very hungry player to get back out on the field. And honestly, I'm sure most of the people watching this saw the video of when he was called by Jason Light to be drafted, and just all that emotion just came pouring out of him, and he is sobbing. And he said, "Thank you for believing in me. And I swear to you, I'm not going to let you down." That's the kind of person he is. So I'm really excited to see what he can do when he gets on the field. But Jacob Parrish, right out of the gate, I think he's your starting slot corner week 1.
That would be great for the Bucs because now they have the depth and they can survive an injury or two. But more importantly, you need to have, just like we're talking about the offensive line, you need to have at least 7 good corners you can be counted on that can go out there and play every week. And that's where the Bucs stand right now. So they're in good shape. Matter of fact, they added one of their other free agents, Vildor, and also a couple of interesting UDFAs. The one that really sticks out to me is Shiloh Sanders at safety. I mean, that kid can hit. That kid is really fun to watch. And I think that kid's a pro. Now, I don't know how he fits in. Probably a lot of special teams. And maybe you could figure out a way, I'm sure Todd could figure out a way to get him on the field a little bit. But I thought he kind of stuck out. What did you think about, because they did add 3 UDFAs in the secondary. Did one particularly stick out yet?
I think it's going to be nearly impossible for any of the UDFAs to crack the initial 53. I do think Shiloh is going to be a priority practice squad guy. I do think he sees the field in the regular season at some point because of the injuries. But when you're talking about, how many of these guys you can keep, that's kind of where the benefit of Izzian and Tyke come in, where if your nickel corner goes down, or if a safety goes down, or, any of these combinations of things happen, you have the position versatility of Tyke Smith and Christian Izzian that they can rotate around and move. You had the emergence of Tyreek Funderburk last year, another undrafted free agent. He got thrown to the wolves because of all the injury issues, but he stepped up. He played really well after he got a little bit of experience under his belt. I look for him to have a better year. Josh Hayes, he's kind of been a special teams guru since he arrived. He got thrown into the deep end on the defensive side of the ball. They bring back Bryce Hall, who got injured in week 1 against the Commanders last year. He was out for the entire season. He provides really reliable depth. So when you take a look at the fact that you have, McCollum and Dean and Morrison and Parrish, and then you get into Tyreek Funderburk and Bryce Hall, and it's like, it's going to be tough for some of these guys to crack the starting lineup, or to even crack the 53-man roster. But again, it shows that they kind of learned from last year, right? Receivers go down. You don't have a viable number 1 option. You go out and you get another one. You lose corner after corner after corner to the point that they were pulling parking lot attendants in and suiting them up 10 minutes before the game to throw them out there and go up against these receivers. They learned from that, and they overloaded on their ability to have depth in the secondary. So I do think Shiloh was a solid player in OTAs in minicamp. But I don't see a pathway, barring catastrophe, that any of the UDFAs in the secondary make the 53-man.
And by the way, corner was the second top need on the list, and that made a lot of sense. And it sure did turn out that way with the 2 picks. Number 1 on the list was edge rusher. And that ended up being prophetic as well, because their top signing was Hassan Reddick. And then they added David Walker and Elijah Roberts in round 4 and round 5. So they doubled down on edge rushers, and their top free agent signing was Hassan Reddick. So do you think that the Bucs, you feel pretty strongly now that they did what they needed to do up front at that specific position to bolster the unit?
Absolutely. I mean, the signing of Hassan Reddick right out of the gate told you that they knew that was a major deficiency, and they were going to target one of the top guys that were on the market. There were hopes, I guess, that the Bucs would pull off a blockbuster deal for a Max Crosby or a Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
But to bring in Reddick on kind of a prove it deal. That's become Jason Light's MO. You go all the way back to when Jason Light first became a GM, and he was giving major money to guys like Michael Johnson and Chris Baker and those kinds of guys, but he always had an out after 1 year. And typically those guys did not work out in that first year, and he was able to get out from those contracts. But now they do these 1 year prove it deals. They did it with Baker Mayfield. He proved it. He got rewarded. Ben Bredesen, same thing. He gets a 1 year deal. He proved it. He got rewarded. Same thing with Hassan Reddick. You look at him, double-digit sacks 4 years in a row up until the debacle that was last year with the Jets. And, I said on my show that was more of a Jets problem than a Reddick problem, in my opinion. So he's got an opportunity here to go out, show that he can still put up those kinds of numbers, create that kind of pressure. And if he does so, he's going to get rewarded. Hopefully that would be with the Bucs. But if not, he is playing for a big contract from someone in free agency again next year. So, the leadership that he brings, Todd Bowles talked about that as well, that, he's kind of, this is a very young edge rush group. Outside of Anthony Nelson, these are really, really young guys. Yaya Diaby, he's only in his third year. You have guys like, Marquise Watts and Jose Ramirez. It's they're in their third years. So the little nuances, the little things that these younger guys don't know. Reddick is an extension of the coaching staff. He's reunited with Larry Foote. He's excited about that. And it's those little things that he's able to coach them up, where you're going to see an impact outside of Reddick's stat sheet. It's going to play into how these other guys are performing. And then as far as David Walker, I mean, I realize that grades are not the end all be all, but they are a metric that I like to use. He was a top 3 edge rusher in all of college football the last 3 years, according to PFF. Like, he has been that dude. And if he didn't play at Central Arkansas, and instead he was at Tennessee or Ohio State or Alabama, this is a day one pick. Like, this guy is an absolute monster. Now, he is going to have to adjust. The competition that he's going to see is not going to be anywhere close to what he saw at Central Arkansas, where he was just dominating guys. But you could have said the same thing, and now I can't. Mike Green out of Marshall. He's not, going to be facing the same kind of competition that he faced at Marshall. So there's going to be a learning curve there, and he went, 2 rounds before Walker did. So this is another guy that has all the tools that you need. It's just about elevating him to the point that he can utilize those tools in the NFL game. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's going to have 5 sacks this season.
Sure.
But he is going to be able to get on the field. He is going to be part of the rotation. And I think this is a candidate along the same lines as Bucky and McMillan last year, where late in the season, when you're making that playoff push and you're getting ready for the postseason, that's when you're really going to start to see his emergence, because he will have had time to get acclimated and he's going to be a little bit more comfortable, doing what he needs to do on the field in order to make an impact. So I really loved that pick by the Bucs. And then Elijah Roberts, he goes from kind of the edge rusher to a hand in the dirt kind of guy, adds to that rotation. Logan Hall, he was up and down last year. He's been up and down every year. Need more consistency out of him, because Roberts will push him. This is a guy that will be hungry to try to get on the field and show that he probably should have been taken earlier in the draft. So, Logan Hall is going to have to elevate his game. And then Elijah Roberts, when he gets his opportunity, kind of the same as Benjamin Morrison, Logan Hall needs to be looking in the rearview mirror, because Roberts is a dude. Like, there's no question. He is a dude, and he is going to fight to make sure that he's part of this defense.
Yeah, what you like about it is that even though they're not drafted high enough to be considered, well, they're definitely part of our long-term plans. Well, that's not the case. They've got to prove themselves. And yeah, everybody's got to prove themselves, but the chances obviously go down the further in the draft order you are. But what helps is that you've signed Hassan Reddick. So even if he's just here for a year, that's given you an extra year to give Walker and Roberts time, that next year comes and you start taking a look at free agency in the draft. Well, what do you have here with Walker and Roberts? Now you've been able to see whether or not you believe those guys can be a part of the regular rotation or not. And then you'd have to go back into the draft or in free agency to add even more potentially long-term talent. So it makes a lot of sense. And now it's up to the coaching staff, the players, and like you said, veterans like Reddick to hopefully get these guys up to speed and to be a part of the long-term plans of the team. Okay, so pretty obviously that's it for the draft picks. As far as the defensive side, again, there's a bunch of UDFAs here. We've talked about a few in the secondary. The other guys that stick out, well, the one that really sticks out to me is Hutmacher from Nebraska. I think that kid has got the opportunity. Again, long-term. I think most of these guys long-term, but I like him. I think Desmond Watson's interesting. I also think, of course, Nick Jackson's interesting based on his career, his long career in college. So there are some guys on defense that have had pretty nice college careers and could be interesting to follow through camp and, of course, more than likely on the practice squad.
Yeah, and the number one name that I'm watching for is Desmond Watson. It was the running joke right after the draft. The Bucs had drafted the smallest and the largest players, in NFL history or whatever it was. But he's already started to shave that weight off. So it
shouldn't probably take that long. When you're that heavy, it should be like, he should probably be able to go from 449 at the combine, wherever he was, with that number down to like 380 by camp. That's how quickly, as long as, he doesn't cheat. So,
right. Well, and Bowles has given him credit. He said he's dedicated to it, but, needs to see more. He's not going to sit there and guarantee a spot. But I do think that Watson has the best chance of anybody on the defensive side to make the 53. And it's for a couple of reasons. Okay. Number one, they are going to be afraid that someone is going to take him. More specifically, they are going to be worried that somebody in the NFC East is going to take him.
Did they give him a lot of money?
They did. He was one of their priority. Okay. He was one of their priority free agents. But, Jason Light said that they did not, or it might have been Todd Bowles. One of the two said that they did not get him strictly for the tush push. Okay. But the Eagles are on the schedule. You have faced the Eagles numerous times over the past couple of years. You're one of the few defenses that has actually stopped the tush push. But beyond that, 4th and 1, 4th and goal. Yeah, how many times did the Commanders go for it on 4th down in that playoff game? And if you're facing a team like the Eagles or like the Lions, who is on the schedule, who loves going for it on 4th down, and you can line Watson and Vita Vea up next to each other, good freaking luck, because those are two guys that could probably push over a skyscraper if they tried to. So, he does still need to prove that he can do it. But, if he plays anything like he did at Florida, I don't think he's going to have a hard time proving that he belongs as part of this defensive line rotation. And he's going to have a legit shot at making, the 53-man roster. And then, like you said, the other one would be Nick Jackson, in my opinion. Linebacker has been a worrisome position. Bucs fans are still worried about it. What are we going to do next to Levante? Well, for the first time in his career, we're going to see a healthy Servassier Dennis. He is, he's a guy that has to step up and make an impact. But Anthony Walker, signing him, Todd Bowles said that it feels like he's been here for years, and he's really impressed. But the depth at linebacker, you saw what happened with KJ, Britt, and JJ Russell last year. It was not good. So outside of Servassier and Walker, you have Deion Jones. You would hope that he starts to play a little better, but, Nick Jackson has a shot here.
Yeah, he played, I think, the most games in NCAA history in college, I believe. That was the deal on him. So obviously extremely experienced player. He played a lot of years, a couple different teams. I think he ended his career with Iowa. So he's a very interesting guy too. And I think he also has a personal history. There was something he dealt with a shooting tragedy regarding some of his teammates that were killed. I forget where it was. Might have been Virginia. So very grown up. Bottom line is he's a very grown up kid that I think definitely has a chance, maybe starting off in the practice squad. And like I said, I think Huckmacher is also someone to keep an eye on.